At that time, Jim, you and I had only been seeing each other for about 4 months. What kept you from just walking away? Like, one of the biggest fears that picky eaters have is telling somebody that they're interested in about this eating habit. And a lot of the times, it will result in people just not being able to handle it and they don't want to hear it. And picky eaters have a connotation of just being difficult to deal with and all of that. So, what kept you from just saying, you know what, this isn't really something that I can deal with?
Well, I think, number one, I felt that you were and still are a very dear friend of mine. And so subsequently, I felt like, well, this is not a make it or break it factor here. If I can understand what's going on and she's being honest with me about what the deal is and why things are happening, there's no reason to discontinue a relationship. And since I was curious to know what was going on, I said, well, I'm going to stay in and see what this is about. So there at that point was also a curiosity factor. And since you were forthcoming and since you were willing to talk about it, then it seemed to me, okay, this is cool. This is a person who, has a condition, a situation, whatever you want to call it, and yet they're able to share that with me and let me know what's going on so that I can feel better about the situation. So that says to me, okay, this person's pretty cool. It's worth my time and trouble, in other words. And I think had you not done that, yeah, probably would have gone the other way. I could kind of would have said, you know what? No, you're lying to me. You're not being honest. You're not talking about this. It's like living a lie. And why would you do that? Why would you want to be in a relationship like that? So I think it was very good that we were able to talk about it and again clarify and help lower my frustration levels more than anything else.
So, divulging as much information about my eating disorder as early as possible is better than hiding it at all costs in order to prevent an inconvenience to the non picky eater.
Yeah, I think the more and the sooner you are forthcoming in explaining what's going on in simple terms that the non-picky eater can understand, okay, the better the chances are of retaining that relationship because the sooner the other person understands what's going on, the sooner the opportunity they are to go, oh, okay, I get it. And then from there, they can make the decision, well, is this a make it or break it issue or not? And especially with something so out there, so different, and so initially unbelievable. It's hard to believe. You only eat this, you only have this, you can only have these things, and you can't have all these other foods. That's really hard to swallow. No pun intended. Uh, you know, so as I say, the sooner you can tell somebody, say, look, this is what's going on. Okay, let me just sit you down here, tell you what's happening. This is the way I am, blah, 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 and you explain it and spell it out. The sooner all that can happen, the better your chances are that the relationship will survive at least, at the very least. And I know as we've talked about this, and this is an important thing, I would say to all picky eaters, especially those who are just discovering, that there are other picky eaters, is the fact that for most people, the picky eating condition is not a huge thing for the non-picky eater. They're not that overly concerned that you're not eating something because they've already eaten. The non-picky eater already eats. They're satisfied. They're full, and you're going to go and find whatever you're going to find anyway. So it's not a huge emotional impacting issue for the non-picky eater. Conversely, for the picky eater, it's everything. It's this horrible. You have to hide this. You got to find excuses. You got to go through every rigmarole you can to explain away, this situation. So I said it once before. I think the most important thing is that you divulge as much information as you can, succinctly and simply, in terms that the non-peak eater can understand. And I think that'll really help the relationship, especially at the get-go.
It's nice to think that it doesn't have a major impact on the normal eater, but to some people it really does. Some people have really gone out of their way to express their disapproval and ignorance, if you will, on the subject, and their minds are made up. And when you're out on a date with somebody and you're excited and you're getting pizza and suddenly they learn that you can't have pepperoni and you need the light sauce or no sauce at all. And they start asking questions and then you start divulging that information. Some people really do just get bent out of shape over what you're eating, and
Yeah.
it's a problem.
I think it's kind of a little like discussing the problem of maybe religion or political persuasions or whatever. There has to be a certain amount of allowances. You must say, well, this person's entitled to believe what they want to believe and think what they want to think. And then also, if this is what they can eat and they really can't eat, that's where they are. I have to accept a little bit of who this person is. And as you say, some people can't do that. Some people are not just as accepting or as understanding. And then that gets into the other realm of, well, what kind of people do you really want to be hanging with? People who are understanding, who are receptive, who want to understand what your situation is, or are so stuck in their ways, or don't care enough or don't think far enough that they won't take the time to figure out and listen to what you're about. So there's that component too. But yeah, you're gonna run into all kinds of people, regardless, and you kind of take your chances anyway when it comes down to it.
Jim, you've sort of had exposure to this feeding issue that a lot of other people haven't. You were there when I discovered pickyeatingadults.com. You were there for Freaky Eaters and you saw what their disposition was. You were there for Dr. Phil. You've been there when I've told mutual friends about my disorder and they've maybe taken the negative road at first and stuff. So you've really gotten to see a side of this that most people don't get a chance to see, and you
Yeah.
know what it's about as much as any non-picky eater can know.
Hmm.
So a lot of the times I will get inquiries from non-picky eaters about how they can help their picky eater become normal. What would you say to somebody that's seeking out to make a picky eater be normal?
Well, I think you'd have to start with what normal means. And I think from a non picky eater, normal would mean eating what pretty much everybody else in the world can eat. Well, to date, that's not going to happen because we don't know enough about picky eaters and the condition to say, well, this is how you fix this problem. There's really no fixing at this point because we don't know enough about the situation to make recommendations as to what to do. So I don't think you can normalize a picky eater. I don't think it's going to happen. So I wouldn't raise any expectations. I would go the route of trying to understand first and then deal with it. And if it's something you really can't handle, then you make a decision that way too. So I would say stay away from normalization or even trying to do that, and better to take the time to talk to the picky eater, to the person you care about, and find out what they're about and why they're doing and what they're feeling and what their fears are, and possibly what you could do to help out.
What is the hardest thing for a normal eater to deal with or to understand in regards of their picky date?
I would say the toughest thing would just be our ignorance in dealing with, well, why aren't you eating? That doesn't make sense. There's great food in front of you. What's wrong with you? There's all the stuff on the menu. You have tons of choices. Why aren't you eating? What's going on? Those are the immediate questions that come out. That's the probably immediate response and reaction from a non-picky eater. So it's difficult to understand right from the get-go. And unless there is some good explanation, clear, simple explanation coming from the picky eater, then the non-picky eater is just out in the cold, and it can become very, very frustrating. And that's not a good thing on a first date or any date for that matter.
Do you have any additional advice you would give to normal eaters or give to picky eaters for that matter on what we can do?
I would say for the picky eaters, give yourself a break. And for the non-picky eaters, be very patient. Try to be understanding. Talk. That would be the main thing. Communicate. Talk about the situation. And, the picky eater to offer as much information as possible up to the limits of the non-picky eater's, desire. I think that would be the best thing to do. And I think it just promotes a really good atmosphere for the relationship.
I would agree, but I'm also going to add a lot of our male picky eaters, I think, struggle with this, especially because men are supposed to be, tearing meat apart and ribs and, and for males who just don't have that, I think that it's a problem for them, and I think that that can inhibit them from wanting to talk about it. So while I definitely advocate for communication, I think that the non-picky eater needs to not push and just wait for it to happen, but at the same time make it known that you are open-minded to learning more, and that this is not a deal breaker for you, and that you want to be there and support and walk through this with your picky eater at the pace in which they're willing to go.
Yes, and that's where the patience comes in, and the understanding. And it's, if the person is, if you care enough about this person, they're the type of person you want to be hanging with, then yeah, you will be patient, you will be considerate, and you will take the time. I think that's the best thing for sure.
Well, thank you, Jim, for coming on the show and talking so candidly about everything. I know that many of our listeners frequently ask questions on how to handle different scenarios of relationships, and hopefully this will help ease some of the anxiety and confusion that goes along with all of that.
Definitely. Well, you're very welcome, and I wish you the best, and all the picky eaters as well.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that concludes this podcast on relationships. If you have any comments regarding today's podcast, please leave me a message in the comments section of my website, or if you have any questions that you'd like to ask privately, you can send me an email at pianapodcast@gmail.com. Again, please stay tuned to my page and be on the lookout for another podcast being posted within the next few days. Hope you enjoyed your listen today, and until next time, take care.